She didn't just tear the sweater. She tore something his mother had spent months quietly stitching together in silence. Ethan Calloway didn't react immediately. He just stood there, watching pieces of red yarn fall onto the hardwood floor of their downtown Charleston apartment. And in that moment, something shifted in him that he couldn't quite name yet. The sweater had never been about fashion. It had never been about taste. It had been about effort, about time, about love expressed in a way his mother, Margaret Calloway, knew best. But to Olivia Prescott, standing across from him with a faint look of disgust still lingering on her face, it had only been ugly. That was the word she chose. Ugly. And then she laughed. A quiet, dismissive laugh that didn't sound cruel on the surface, but landed far heavier than she intended. Ethan bent down slowly, picking up one torn sleeve as if it still had value. Because to him, it did. "Why would you do that?" he finally asked, his voice calm but unusually low. Olivia crossed her arms, shrugging lightly. "Ethan, come on. You weren't actually going to wear that thing to Carter's Christmas party, were you?" The question wasn't curious. It was rhetorical, judgment disguised as casual concern. Ethan didn't answer right away, because the truth was he had been. Not because he liked the sweater, but because his mother had asked him to. And for Margaret, asking was never something she did lightly. She had always been careful not to impose, careful not to demand, careful not to be a burden. So when she said, "I made you something for Christmas this year," Ethan had already decided he would wear it no matter what it looked like. But Olivia didn't see that side of things. To her, appearances mattered. Presentation mattered. And tonight's party, hosted by Carter Whitfield in his sprawling waterfront estate, wasn't just any gathering. It was a room full of investors, executives, and social circles Olivia had spent years carefully positioning herself within. And Ethan showing up in a hand-knitted sweater that didn't fit the aesthetic she curated felt, to her, like a liability. "Do you realize how that would look?" she continued, her tone tightening slightly. Ethan finally stood up, holding the torn pieces in his hand. "How what would look?" Olivia exhaled, already frustrated by the fact that he didn't seem to understand. "Like you don't belong there." That sentence landed differently than she expected, because Ethan didn't hear it as concern. He heard it as judgment, not just of the sweater, but of him. And before we go further, think about this for a second. If you were in Ethan's position, would you see Olivia's reaction as honesty or as disrespect? Would you brush it off? Or would something deeper start to bother you? Ethan placed the torn sweater pieces on the kitchen counter, carefully, almost ceremonially, like he was trying to preserve what was left of something already gone. "She made this herself," he said quietly. Olivia hesitated for a split second, not because she didn't know that, but because she hadn't really considered what that meant. "I know," she replied, softer now, "but that doesn't change the fact that it looks." She stopped herself before finishing the sentence again, but it didn't matter. The damage had already been done. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, not angry, not shouting, just processing, and that silence felt heavier than any argument could have. Because Olivia was used to conflict being loud, quick, explosive. But this was quiet, and quiet felt dangerous. That night, Ethan didn't go to the party. He sent Carter a brief message. "Something came up. I won't make it. No explanation. No follow-up." Olivia went alone, and while she smiled, networked, and maintained her polished image, there was a subtle tension beneath everything she did. Because Ethan not showing up wasn't just an absence. It was noticeable. People asked questions. "Where's Ethan tonight?" And each time, Olivia gave a slightly different answer. He wasn't feeling well. He had work to finish. He's coming later, but he never came. When she returned home just after midnight, the apartment felt different. Not empty, but distant. Ethan was sitting on the couch, the torn sweater pieces neatly folded beside him. He looked up as she walked in. "How was the party?" he asked. His tone was neutral. Too neutral. "It was fine," Olivia replied, placing her purse down. "You should have come." Ethan nodded slowly. "Yeah." Another pause. And then quietly, "I want to see my mom today." Olivia froze for a moment, because she hadn't expected that. "What did you tell her?" she asked carefully. Ethan looked down at the folded sweater. "I told her I loved it." He paused. and that I'd wear it next time I saw her. Olivia swallowed, a small, uncomfortable feeling settling in her chest. Ethan, but she didn't know what to say next, because there wasn't an easy sentence that could undo what had already happened. The next few days were polite. That was the best way to describe them. Not hostile, not aggressive, just distant. Conversations were shorter, interactions more measured, and the ease that once existed between them felt replaced by something more cautious. Then, 3 days later, Margaret Calloway called. She wanted to stop by. Just for a little while, she said. I baked something for you both. Ethan agreed without hesitation. Olivia didn't object, but internally, she felt a tightening she couldn't quite explain. Because she knew the sweater would come up, and she knew she wasn't ready for that conversation. When Margaret arrived, she greeted Olivia warmly, genuinely warmly, with no trace of suspicion or judgment, which somehow made Olivia feel worse. They sat together in the living room, talked about work, about the holidays, about small, safe things, until Margaret's eyes landed on the folded sweater sitting on the armchair. Oh, she smiled softly. You kept it there. Ethan nodded. I did. Margaret picked it up gently, running her fingers over the stitching. I know it's not perfect, she said. I had to redo the sleeves twice. Olivia felt something twist in her stomach, because now it wasn't just a sweater. It was effort, time, patience, all things she had dismissed in seconds. And this is where things shifted, because Ethan didn't defend Olivia. He didn't explain. He didn't soften what had happened. He just said, it got damaged. Margaret looked up, confused. Damaged? Ethan met her eyes. Torn. Silence filled the room, and Olivia felt it pressing against her. Not as accusation, but as reality. Margaret didn't react dramatically. She didn't get angry. She didn't even look at Olivia right away. She just nodded slowly. I see. And somehow, that response carried more weight than anger ever could. Because it wasn't about blame. It was about understanding. And maybe disappointment. Before we continue, be honest. Do you think Ethan handled this the right way by telling the truth without protecting Olivia? Or should he have handled it differently? Margaret placed the sweater back down. Carefully. I can fix it, she said gently. It'll take some time, but I can fix it. Ethan nodded. I know you can. Olivia finally spoke, her voice quieter than usual. I'm really sorry. Margaret turned to her, offering a small, kind smile. It's all right. But Olivia knew it wasn't. Because some things, even when forgiven, don't return to what they were before. Over the next few weeks, the dynamic between Ethan and Olivia continued to evolve. Not in dramatic confrontations, but in subtle shifts. Ethan started making decisions independently. Small ones at first, then bigger ones. Plans, commitments, things he used to automatically include Olivia in. Now, he didn't always, and Olivia noticed. She felt it, but she couldn't quite confront it without acknowledging the reason behind it. The sweater had become more than just an incident. It had become a symbol of values, of respect, of what mattered and what didn't. Eventually, one evening, Olivia broke the silence. Are we okay? She asked. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He looked at her, really looked at her, as if trying to understand something he hadn't questioned before. I think we're figuring that out, he said. And that answer, more than anything, made Olivia realize this wasn't something that would be fixed quickly or easily, because it was never just about a sweater. It was about what that moment revealed, about how quickly something meaningful could be dismissed, and about whether two people actually valued the same things in the same way. Weeks later, when Margaret returned the repaired sweater, it looked almost identical to how it had before. But not quite. There were slight differences, tiny imperfections where the yarn had been reworked. And Ethan noticed every single one of them, because now they meant something different. He wore it the next time he visited her, without hesitation, without apology, and Olivia watched that from distance, understanding something she hadn't fully grasped before, that sometimes the things we call small are only small because we don't see the story behind them. And by the time we do, it might already be too late to undo what we've done.